Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 707. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, Susan Parente and I discuss the difference between leadership and management in her Not A Scrumdamentalist column. These two concepts are related, but not the same. The votes are in. The next three books in the Reread Saturday are Coaching Teams by Alyssa Atkins, Extraordinary Badass Agile Coaching by Bob Galen, Team Topologies by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pace and Ruth Malin. We're going to read them in that order, even though Extraordinary Badass Agile Coaching was the top pick. I need some time to actually read it myself, so this will be a reread. Susan Parente, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be here.
Susan, your Not A Scrumdamentalist column is one of my favorites, and one of my favorites not only to record, it's fun to edit because I get to listen to it again, and then I get to listen to it once it's up because, that's the quality check, right? Just to make sure. I have messed that up once or twice in the 16, 17 years we've been doing this. Susan, today, management and leadership. Same thing, not the same thing, related, both of them unicorns, don't exist?
It's a great question. I think it's one of those things like, as a project manager, and that's primarily my work role. I'm always struggling with this. Like, when is it appropriate for me to be a manager? When should I be a leader? How do I do both? I think first of all, leadership is something that's always there. I don't think necessarily you think you turn that on or off. Management, a lot of times I think of that as like all those HR things that you got to do. You got to set people's like performance objectives for the year, and you have to have a
track their PTO,
track their paid time off. Hopefully you have a system that helps you with that. But and then there's the most recent thing we're dealing a lot with not a lot, but unfortunately some, with remote work, is being clear about what it means to work remotely. So for example, if somebody is contacted in the middle of the day, like I reach out to my team member, and let's say I reach out to them at 10:30, I shoot them an email, and then 11:30, I send them a Teams message. And then at 1 o'clock, I give them a call, and I still haven't heard from them. So yeah, that's not being available. So. And they're not in meetings at all those hours. Like, I know what their meeting schedule is, right? So apparently HR says you got to make it abundantly clear what the expectation is for responsiveness, which I think is kind of odd, because if you're working full-time at a contract, it should be obvious what the time for responsiveness is. Obviously, if you're working on 10 different things, you're in 5 different meetings, there's a different expectation than if you're literally in no meetings and I know you're working on something, but I don't know what you're working on because you're not responding to me. So that is the annoying space of management. And it's funny because when I was young, I was like, oh, I want to be a manager. I want to be a manager. I want to be a manager. And nowadays at this part of my career, I'm like, that's the thing I least want to do. It's annoying. It's painful. It's like, I feel like you're being a mommy. Like, seriously, come on, let's just be adults. What I like is being a leader. Being a leader is an entirely different thing. When you're a leader, when people come to you, even if they don't have to. They come to you because the last time they came to you, whatever problem they had, you helped them solve. They do for advice. A colleague of mine who used to report to me, I never thought of him as not. I always thought of him as being my equal professionally. Maybe even definitely he has more seniority than I do. He reported to me on a contract just because that was how the contract was set up, but that didn't mean anything as far as our report went. Well, he's called me several times since then. He's on another contract, and he's called me for, what's your opinion? What do you think of this? And actually, recently, a phone call came up where his management in the work that he's doing, he had a question about, hey, does this make sense to do this type of thing for management? And what I said is, it's interesting. The person you're reporting to, I don't think they understand the difference in management and leadership. And they're not like a forceful person who's trying to micromanage. Like, they're not trying to tell everybody what to do, but they're trying to like have their finger on everything. And actually that gets pretty exhausting after a while. Like, she literally
FOMO.
wants, what's that?
FOMO, fear of missing out.
Exactly. And I think that her rationale behind this is that she wants to make sure that everybody's voice is being heard. She wants to make sure that she's connected with everybody. But so what this looks like is there's a daily stand-up. Now, it's only 3 times a week, but it's a half an hour and there's 20 people.
A daily stand-up, half an hour, and 3 times a week. Some of those words don't belong together.
It doesn't. It does not at all. And so this is what kind of bastardized agile looks like, right? And I'm like, I'm shaking my head on the phone, like, I was like, what? No. Like, what? What? How many people? How often? How long?
People.
I was like, yes. And the person telling me this is he actually is a team lead, and he's saying, well, why don't I just show up and have my team members not be there? And I'm like, well, are you saying that because of your concern, or do your team members want to be at the meeting? He's like, no, absolutely not. They don't even want to be there. They're like, this is a complete waste of my time. And because they're remote, they're in the background doing other work anyway, because they're like, when it comes to their turn, they say their little, 2-minute thing, and then they go back to doing whatever. So this is like, they would rather not be there. So he said to the manager, hey, I don't want my team members to be there. And she kind of agreed to it. But then the other team leads, their team members are there. So then they argued like, well, why aren't his team members there and mine have to be? And it's like, oh, dear God, like, just like, let people work. Like, management should be there to support work being done. It should not be a bureaucratic burden on top of what you're doing. When it becomes a layer on top of what you're doing in order to have structure, that is not the point. Let people work. Let people do their job and just get the heck out of the way. That's the Not A Scrumdamentalist message today. Let people do their job and get the heck out of the way.
To be honest with you, I mean, that answer, you could be a scrumdamentalist and that would still be the right answer, right? The whole, I have never understood this, this abject misinterpretation. We're going to get the whole account together, 20 people, 100 people, and we're going to do a daily stand-up, and everybody's going to tell everybody what they're doing and give them a status. And it's like,
and nobody cares.
No, they don't. It has nothing to do with what they're doing. And very frankly, all you are doing is teaching them to lie. We create these scenarios that say, hey, this is all about the managers so that they know what they're doing. So, aren't we really describing a fear-based environment? Because why do you need to know that level of precision every day or every other day what people are going to do if they're actually delivering?
Yeah, so you're right in that. It's so funny how, this is the beauty of having colleagues that don't work where you work. So it's very funny how I just told you that scenario and you jumped right to people are going to like make up stories. They're going to make up things. And sure enough, that's exactly what they're doing. That's what my colleague told me. He's like, so it ends up being this like showboating, like, oh, I did this and I did that and I'm going to do this. And it's like, this is like a world of lies. So like now, not only am I wasting my time listening to people talk about things I don't care about that don't matter to me, but they're also like not even true. So you're like, so it compounds the whole like futility of this. And it's funny because the manager, what they said is, well, I feel like if they're not there, then I won't have a relationship with them. And I'm like, okay, that isn't creating a relationship. So the funny thing is, what would be more valuable is to have an all hands meeting once every 2 weeks or once a month where you actually talk to people about, hey, how are you doing? How do you feel about the contract? How do you feel about the customer? What are struggles you're having? How can I support you? Or just pick up the phone and talk to them directly, right?
Bingo.
That would create a relationship. So a relationship is not created with 20 people in a room making up stuff they accomplished and making up stuff they're going to do. That doesn't create a relationship. So it's funny, like her rationale does not match the activity. And to me, what the first thing I said about that is, here's a person who means well, but doesn't understand the difference between management and leadership. So what she's not being is a leader, and what she's trying to do is management, and what she's actually doing is wasting her people's time. She's not creating the rapport that she wants to create. And, there could be some other bad outcomes of that other than wasted time. And, there could be, people could maybe start to not see her as a leader, not respect her as a leader because of these types of activities. It's funny because when I was on the contract with that gentleman, I did the complete opposite. I had a very small team meeting with my 2 team leads and my document specialist. And we met once a week and, okay, what's going on? We had a great rapport with each other. Anybody could say whatever they wanted. Nobody had to worry about what everybody else was listening to. And then I didn't talk to the people who reported to the team leads. Every now and then I might show up at one of their meetings, to just chat with them, or I'd call all hands every now and then. But, you call the all hands and you say a bunch of stuff and it's just like crickets in the background. Nobody wants to talk.
No, it's totally asynchronous conversation at that point, or information flow.
Yeah. I mean, if I really want to connect with somebody, if I think they're struggling or have some challenges, I just call them up. Hey, how's it going? How's it going? What's going on?
What is that? Call.
You mean like them on the phone? Call them up.
People don't do that anymore, do they? Unfortunately, I don't think they do, right? They text them or they, God forbid, they Teams them, or they have gone to even a less intimate form of communication. Yep. They don't even use video.
Yep. No. So I'm in the cyber space right now with my main contracts, and the cybersecurity people do not like to be on video, which is great because I'm usually wearing like yoga pants and a sweatshirt. And actually even yesterday we did an interview with somebody and I changed to like, I feel like fleece with like a little bit of a collar is a step up from like a hoodie. And so I actually changed, but it was funny because the other 2 people interviewing with me, we were interviewing this person, they're both wearing hoodies. And I'm like, well, darn it. I took an extra moment to dress up. And the person we were interviewing was wearing like a beautiful silk shirt, and she was dressed very nicely. And I applauded her for that. Like, but I didn't actually say something, but I'm thinking to myself, we're here with like, hoodies on or whatever. And we're interviewing this person. She's dressed very nicely. So kudos to her. I agree with her. I would have, dressed nicer than the person interviewing you. That's never a bad idea. But yes, cybersecurity people in general, whether male or female, do not generally like video. One of my team leads, he used to just have like a running chat with all of his team members. And he'd be like, hey, what's the status of such and such system? Who knows? And somebody would answer and be like, that's that. He didn't have like weekly team meetings because he's like, they don't want to go to them. I don't really want to have them. So we just do chat, constant chat. So it works. Like nobody works. It doesn't have to look a certain way.
I know it doesn't have to look a certain way, but constant chat also means constant interruptions, which means productivity and focus is in the toilet. And there's a real dark side to that. Let's go back to the example just for a second. The person that is conflating leadership and management, how were they trained at either one of those 2 things?
That's a very interesting thing. So the company that I'm doing this contract through, they've actually started talking about training for project managers. and what are some things that project managers need, et cetera. And it was funny because after this interaction, I sent them an email because they'd actually interviewed me. They interviewed some of the project managers about what are some of the needs that there are. And I said, something we should definitely do is help people distinguish between management and leadership. And what does that look like? I think it's something that even when you know it, you need to be constantly reminded of it. But I also think, people come to an organization, they come to a project and they're like, hey, I'm a project manager, I got a PMP. Well, that does not mean that everybody knows or has the same skills. Like, it doesn't mean that at all. And I think we oftentimes make assumptions. When you put somebody as a lead for a contract, I get that they have the role called PM, but there's more going on there than just managing that project. You've got customer relationship management. There's a lot of things on a contracts perspective that are not really project management. You're not really taught about those in PMP. There's far more finance than most people are comfortable with as PMs. Most people kind of suffer through the PMP to, do those finance equations. And this is real life. You're reviewing an invoice before it goes to the customer, make sure that the money's right. That could be a major problem. Now, fortunately, most organizations have somebody in finance to support you and check things and all that. But there's a lot of, in the contracts world, the role of PM is quite different than what the PMBOK guide says you do. And there's a lot of managerial things in there, but there's also leadership things. You are the point of contact for that contract, which means you're the belly button to push for the customer. You're also the belly button to push for the company. So I often feel like I'm being drawn and quartered between my client and my company. That's not a good feeling. It depends on who's your manager, who's your leadership in the organization. Right now, I've actually got a good situation where I feel like I have a competent, powerful, VP that I report to, and he basically is like, "Hey, what's going on? Anything I can help with?" That's like his general attitude. And when you say, "Hey, I need this," he has power and he has resources to support you. And that's the best thing in the world. So, whether you like somebody or not, or you like their style or not, like at the end of the day, if you escalate to your manager and they have no power and they have no resources, it's pretty much useless. So I have a good situation right now, but it can be challenging if you're leading a contract. You've got company requirements, you got customer requirements, and you're kind of supposed to manage all that. And to be honest with you, I would say most people on the contract have no idea the things that project manager is dealing with on a regular basis to just keep everything afloat, and there's a lot to go on there. And I think that throughout the day, you're jumping from management to leadership. To me, management is a bunch of tasks and delegations. Leadership is that confidence in that we're moving in the right direction. You're the captain of the ship, and you're not freaking out. You have a strategy. You're proactive. You're ahead of things. You're thinking about project and the project health and the customer happiness. You think about the implications of decisions. All those things are leadership, not management.
Susan, if people wanted to continue the conversation about leadership and management, how would they go about doing that?
Go ahead and find me on LinkedIn, Susan Parente. You'll see that I'm in the DC area. I'm actually technically between DC and New York, and I do a lot of things in both those places. But in
this distributed world, aren't you really everywhere in the world?
Sort of, yes, really. Really so. Our teams are now having people from many different locations, different time zones. So that becomes very interesting. And, if there's ever a question, I'll give you a little time zone tip. If there's ever a question, if somebody sets a meeting or if there's an event and you want to, if somebody is having a conversation with you about what time something is, the time they're talking about is always the time of the headquarters of the organization you belong to or where the client site is. That should go without saying, but surprisingly enough, people think about time in their own time. It doesn't work that way. So if I'm setting a customer meeting, I don't care where you are, nor can I keep track of what time zone you are in, because there's a lot of people on the team. So if somebody says, well, this meeting's at 1:00, it's 1:00 client time. That's like the understood factor. And it's funny because it happens a lot that people are like, oh, I thought you meant 1:00 my time. Like, why in the world would I set things up based on your time and not the customer's time? It makes no sense at all. So find me on LinkedIn. I have a group there called Agile Risk Management. You can also shoot me an email, Parente at S as in Sam, the number 3-tec.com.
Super. And by the way, next time we get together, I want to talk about time. That was the third topic. And
what's the third topic?
Time and real time versus relative time. Think about Christmas, right? Everybody, the time getting to Christmas always just crawls. But the calendar turns at 1,440 minutes in a day, like clockwork. But our perception of time is different depending on where we are in a project, on a contract, and not. And how do we manage that as leaders? Thank you very much. This was excellent. In Reread Saturday News, this week we are revisiting and re-editing the conclusion of our first reread to tide you over to the completion of Why Limit WIP. I was in the mountains backpacking, glamping, and visiting my father for the past 8 days. This, in its own right, would not have precluded completing the reread, but I forgot the power cord to my laptop. Next week, we conclude our reread of Why Limit WIP. We are drowning in work. Remember, you can buy a copy, use the link in the show notes to support the podcast, but even if you don't, buy a copy and read along. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, Brian Weaver returns to the Software Process and Measurement Cast to discuss the impact of AI on business, leadership, and development. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?